Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Now I really hope you've enjoyed the Underworld series the last couple of weeks. We're talking about vampires still, but it's going to be the vampires from Dracula Untold. Now guys, I absolutely love this movie. I think it's so underrated and I really feel like it has a great story behind it. Despite a poor reception from critics, the movie was revitalized when it came to Netflix, becoming the most watched movie for 3 weeks straight on the platform. Dracula Untold tells the story of Vlad Tepes, the Prince of Transylvania, a former warlord, famous for his unforgiving and relentless approach to war, who makes a deal with Gaius Cesar, the first vampire, in exchange for use of the latter's powers in order to save his people. In today's video, we'll be taking a look at the history of the vampire within the Untold universe. We'll also examine how Dracula actually becomes a vampire, and we'll be looking at vampires in general, their strengths, their weaknesses, their mindset. We'll take a real deep dive into this world. So let's get started. Let's begin with the tale of the first vampire, Gaius Cesar Augustus Germanicus, the former emperor of Rome between 37 and 41 AD. He was known for his tyrannical leadership, intense cruelty, and extravagant lifestyle. Lusting for immortality and power greater than any human could possess, Gaius made a deal with a demon in exchange for such power, and thus became the first ever vampire on record. However, with Gaius's power came a price. He would be cursed with an insatiable lust for blood, which was needed in order to sustain him and allow him to use his powers to their maximum potential. Unfortunately for Gaius, the demon was not entirely honest about their deal, which actually seems to be the case with demons across many franchises. That saying of "you never make a deal with a demon" springs to mind from the Supernatural TV series. Anyway, this demon in question lured Gaius to Broken Tooth Mountain, where he imprisoned him through a curse, destined to remain there forever, until one worthy enough of Gaius' powers, worthy enough of the darkness, came along. For centuries, the vampire fed on travelers who visited the mountain, none of which fit the desired description of what he believed was truly worthy. That was, of course, until he encountered fearless warlord Vlad Tepes, the only man to enter the cave, who wasn't afraid of what it held inside. This intrigued Gaius, especially after Vlad wounded him when the vampire tried to attack him. Questioning if he may have finally found a successor that would see him freed from his forced captivity, the vampire allowed Vlad to leave, wondering if he would return. Surprisingly, Vlad did return the next day, and judging by the amount of bones and skulls surrounding him, came quickly to the realization that nobody ever had the privilege of leaving in the first place before, let alone returning. Gaius sensed hope within Vlad, something no man has ever displayed when entering the cave. He knew that only a man overwhelmed with desperation would submit themselves to the darkness, a man with unyielding willpower, a man that would go to any length necessary to save his people, despite the repercussions it may have on him and him alone. Vlad was willing to become the monster that was needed to destroy his enemies, not the hero. Gaius then cut his wrist and drained some of the blood into a broken skull, which Vlad drank from. Drinking the blood would give him 3 full days with all of the vampire's powers. If he resisted the overwhelming urge to drink human blood, he would therefore return to his human state. If, however, he gave in to his urges and consumed the blood, he would be confined to his vampiric status for all eternity and forever need to sustain himself on human blood. Vlad gave in to drinking blood and became Dracula. I'm not retelling the entire movie plot here guys, just the parts that involve specific vampires, as this is Gaius' story, so I just wanted to cover those parts before I move on to Vlad himself and discuss the powers and abilities that he and the other vampires have. So let's move on and actually have a detailed look at Vlad Tepes. Vlad's story is a rather tragic one. He had always seen himself as a man of his people. He was the Prince of Transylvania and achieved some notoriety for his ruthless and unforgiving nature during his war days for the Turks. As we've seen from his encounter with Gaius, Vlad made a pact with him that would grant him his powers for 3 days. He was the first vampire fledgling created by the Master Vampire. During this time, Vlad experienced an overwhelming influx of power, ability and skill. He had enhanced vision, which allowed him to see from long distances and also allowed him to slow the speed of things down. He could zoom his focus onto anything he wished, and overall, it gave Vlad an entirely new view on the world around him. Vlad had super strength, super speed. He could transfigure himself into a large colony of bats that could plow through dozens of men with ease, which made Vlad extremely effective on the battlefield. He could also have a similar effect in his physical form. I've made a full video on Vlad's life and the movie plot, which I'll link at the end of this video. With that being said, I'm going to include the final 36 hours of Vlad's powers for the purpose of this video topic, as it's crucial to understanding Vlad's true reasoning for becoming a vampire permanently and gives insight to the actual origins of the species. So let's take a look at his first encounter with the Turks on his return from Broken Tooth Mountain after making the pact. He encounters a battalion of Turks at the castle walls. Vlad speaks to his soldiers on protecting the castle and rushes towards the enemy. He single-handedly kills every single one of them. Afterward, he tells his soldiers not to question the events that occurred on the battlefield and tells them to round up the women and children and start heading towards Kosia Monastery, as it is too remote a place for cannon fire. Vlad has always had the safety of his people as his first priority. He cherished them and cherished what they brought to the city. He even kept a piece of silver close to his skin in order to keep him weak so he would not harm them as his bloodlust grew stronger. He was deeply angered and hurt when they turned on him by trapping him in the chapel in order to burn him alive. He screamed that he became the monster he is in order to protect them, for them. Despite his sacrifice, none of the people he wished to protect stopped to actually realize what he had done and what he had become. Vlad's story really takes a dark turn on the third and final day, the last day before his planned return to human form, which would see him lose all his powers. He wants to end the battle with the Turks before that happens. During the battle, Vlad is lured towards a decoy of Mehmed, while the actual Mehmed takes Vlad's son Ingeris. Marina falls off the edge of a cliff and Vlad can't save her in time as she lays there, about to take her final breath. She encourages Vlad to drink her blood in order to save their son, and he does so willingly, despite knowing what he will become. Because he consumed human blood, the Master Vampire is now free from his imprisonment in Broken Tooth Mountain, as Vlad becomes a fully fledged vampire. His powers are now even greater than before. He can move faster, fly quicker, and his strength is even more enhanced. Vlad defeats and kills Mehmed despite being surrounded by the latter's silver in order to weaken him. However, despite becoming a vampire permanently, Vlad believes that someone that has such darkness within them, such evil, should not be allowed to roam the earth, and that his people were right to do what they did by trying to destroy him. He is a product of the devil. Using his powers to clear the weather, Vlad exposes himself to the sun, apparently killing himself along with the other vampires he created in order to help him fight Schlegem, a satanic worshipper who detected Vlad was a vampire from the beginning, goes to the tent where Vlad's body lays and feeds him his blood, reviving him. Vlad this time decides to live, but does so in the shadows, keeping a very low profile, and is seen in modern day as he approaches his lost wife Milena's doppelganger. So guys, obviously I just summarized Vlad's story. As I mentioned, I do have a full video on him, while this video is more so about the origins of vampires from the Untold universe and basically what they're all about. Now, I mentioned a few moments ago that Vlad created additional vampires in order to help him fight off Mehmed before destroying them with his powers of weather manipulation, exposing them all to the sun. I want to take a look at these vampires, what powers they had, and why they actually turned on Vlad despite him being their creator. The vampires consisted of some of Vlad's closest council members, confidants and townspeople, but after killing their enemies, they quickly seemed to embrace the creatures they had become. They embraced the darkness within them and did so rather quickly, especially Kazan, Vlad's most trusted advisor. Kazan immediately looked upon all humans as enemies of his new race, deciding to kill Ingeras rather than advising or even encouraging Vlad to do so, as if Kazan was in control. The vampires seemed to have little to no respect for Vlad after acquiring their new powers, when they were incredibly loyal to him as humans. They all seemed to be behind Kazan and his plan to dispose of humans, including Vlad's own son. This is clear evidence that it was Vlad's willpower alone that prevented him from committing himself to the darkness fully, like those he had just created. These vampires were incredibly strong and appeared quite feral when they embraced their abilities. They can also transform their face to have grey, mottled and decayed looking skin, a dislocated, larger and more animalistic mouth and teeth, pointed and sharp black fingertips and hands, and bright red glowing pupils, as well as their eyes becoming distorted in colour or completely black. They had little to no self-control and seemed to be completely consumed by their bloodlust. They can also transfigure themselves into a colony of bats in order to fly around and also attack, just as Vlad could. The Untold vampires are incredibly vulnerable to the sun, and the fact that they are also vulnerable to holy crosses or crucifixes demonstrates that they are indeed the children of the devil. The crucifixes appear as if the holder had the power of the sun in their hands. It was the same outcome when these vampires came into contact with silver, as they all seem to have the power of the sun. They can also be destroyed by a stake to the heart, which causes a rather violent death, as Kazan experienced. The vampires have rapid healing, have no need for sleeping, eating or drinking, and are immortal due to the fact that death has already claimed their human life. All these vampires have the power to create more of their kind. By allowing them to ingest their blood, which will seemingly poison and quickly kill them, it causes them to have monstrous dreams with images of the people they love the most being in danger or even dying. The vampire has 3 days to consume human blood before returning to human form. If you want to continue the Dracula Untold story with the Vampire Folklore YouTube channel, you can do so by checking out the full video on Vlad himself. It's right here for you to click. I'm actually going to remake it into an updated version, so make sure to look out for that. You can also click this card below to continue or check out my Underworld playlist, where I cover the character profiles of vampires and lycans. Click the card now and keep your viewing experience ongoing.